And our first case this morning is American Fleet, Inc., and it's case number 6564. And Mr. Dixon, could you go ahead and introduce the file for us, please?
All right, case 6564, an application for modification of a conditional use for a junkyard and a distance variance from a public highway. The site is located at 633 Stone Chapel Road, Suite D, Westminster, Maryland, on property zone I-2 Heavy Industrial District in Election District 7. By American Fleet, Inc., Code of Public Local Laws and Ordinances, Section 158.002, 158.082, 158.155C, and 158.133. A site visit is tentatively scheduled for June 18, 2025 at approximately 9:15 a.m. In the file of this matter, we have the following documents. Site minutes. A June 2nd, 2025 notice of public hearing for this case. There are various memos responding to Joe Vance's request to various state and local agencies, one from Thomas Harris, permits and inspections. Comment, a building permit will be required for the change of use of this site, of this suite. There is a June 12, 2025 memo from Carly Falat, Comprehensive Planning Technician. The above referenced BZA case has been reviewed for consistency with the policies and recommendations contained in the Carroll County Master Plan as amended in 2019, the Carroll County Water and Sewer Master Plan, and other functional plans. Planning staff finds that the application is consistent with the Carroll County Master Plan. There's a June 12th, 2025 letter from Daphne Daly, Secretary to the Planning Commission. After having reviewed the information contained in the attached analysis, the facts as presented in the application, the relevant portions of the applicable comprehensive and other functional plans, and in accordance with the land use article, this conditional use request, if granted, is consistent with the policies, timing of the implementation of the plan, timing of development, timing of rezoning, and development patterns. There is a response to Joe Vance's request from Laura Matthias, Bureau Chief, Development Review. The comment, a simplified site plan is in review for the expansion. There is a response to Joe Vance's request from Janet O'Meara, Bureau Chief, Resource Management. Comments from Pat Varga, none. Hearing notice was posted May 20th, 2025 by Zoning Inspector Michael R. There is a response to Joe Vance's request from Anastasia Yemelyanova, Zoning Administrator. BZA, her comments, BZA case 6473 was approved on October 27, 2023 for a junkyard and multiple distance variances. Zoning Administration case 2136 was approved on November 30th, 2023 for a reduction of a distance requirement from public highway from 300 feet to 200 feet for a junkyard. Zoning certificate was issued on October 10th, 2024 for automotive dismantler and recycler junkyard after a simplified site plan. The applicant is requesting an expansion approval for the existing junkyard and a reduction of the distance requirement of 300 feet to 124 feet from a public highway for a total variance of 174 feet. There is a decision here, case ZA 2136, zoning administrator decision. Signed by Jay Voigt, November 30th, 2023. There is a map in here from CLSI. There is a response to Joe Vance's request to various state and local agencies from J.P. Smith Jr., Program Manager, Ag Land Preservation Program. This property is not in ag preservation. I have no comment at this time. There's a May 6, 2025 letter from David K. Bowersox to Joe Vance. And then there is the application. There is a decision, case 6473, October 24, 2023, applicant American Fleet, Inc. And it's, was to hear a conditional use for junkyard and multiple distance variances. Decision signed October 27, 2023 by Melvin E. Bale, Jr., Chairman. I would ask that the file be entered into evidence.
Do I have a motion to enter the file into evidence?
So moved.
No objection.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. We will enter the file into evidence. Before we get started, make sure that you've signed in on the clipboard on the side. And if you're going to be a witness here today, it looks like we have possibility of 4 witnesses. Well, 2, I guess. Could you please stand and raise your hand? Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Very good. You can have a seat. Mr. Bowersox.
Yes, sir. I would like to, if I can, reintroduce those of you who were on the board in October 2023 to Mr. Vladimir Besser. He is the principal of American Fleet, the applicant before you. He was before you at that time. This is not a new use. In order to avoid a duplication of a lot of the testimony from before, I am, without objection, going to proffer a quick summary of how we got here and what this application is about to speed things along. As I said, it's not a new use. We were first before you on October 24th, 2003, and that was in case number 6473.
2023?
2023.
Okay.
In case number 6473 that Mr. Dixon mentioned in his remarks. The applicant was seeking a conditional use at 633 Stone Road, it's the site of the old shelter systems. It's I-2 zoning. He was seeking a conditional use to allow him to take stock Ford F-550 trucks, strip them of some of the, shall we say, domestic standard parts, reinforce the chassis, and otherwise modify them so that the modified chassis could be shipped primarily to Ukraine at the time, to be refitted as armored vehicles and armored ambulances for their military efforts. Since then, he's also had contracts with Israel to do the same for them. And that's what he's been doing. Now, we were here before the board asking for a junkyard use. The reason is that in order to do what he is doing, he required a license from the state of Maryland for an automotive dismantler and recycler license. What he would do is he'd resell the parts that were taken off of the stock vehicles, not retail, but they would be packaged, and when they had the sufficient quantity in a lot, they would be sold to a vendor for distribution or resale on a secondary market. Carroll County zoning ordinance doesn't have any, shall I say, pigeonhole for a use that is an auto dismantler and recycler who was performing activities such as Mr. Besser proposed and has been doing. The closest thing anybody could find in the zoning ordinance was a junkyard. So we came in with a junkyard application, even though there is none of these vehicles, other than the new ones waiting to be processed, on the lot. There are no salvage vehicles, there's no parts, there's nothing like that on the site. It's all conducted indoors. We took certain precautions to make sure that everyone knew that we were not going to be a junkyard in the traditional sense. And we had some self-imposed limitations with the residential neighborhood nearby. And there were certain conditions imposed as a condition of board approval in case 6473. Particularly, conditions 6 and 7 required, if I can paraphrase, that if there was any modification or expansion or change of footprint with a use, that it would have to come back for board approval. So what brings us here? Mr. Besser is finding he needs somewhat more room to store the tires, the doors, to make room in his shop for processing. It worked okay for a while, but he's finding it can be done more efficiently if he had more room inside the structure there at 633 Stone Road. He has signed a lease with a landlord for additional space inside, adjacent to where he is now. Nothing will go outside. It's all self-contained, just as it was before. So we are here asking for a modification of the conditional use, if for no other reason than out of an abundance of caution because of condition 6 and 7 in the 2023 decision. There's also a request for a variance. Not only does his use not really fit well under the junkyard definition in the zoning ordinance, there's a provision in the zoning ordinance under specific uses, section 158.155, called junkyards. And subsection C of that provision says no operations, including storage or sales of parts, shall be closer than 300 feet to any public highway. We're going to introduce an exhibit to show you the proximity of the expansion area for storage to the public right-of-way for Stone Chapel Road. And it's less than 300 feet. It's approximately 124, 125 feet. It's still enclosed by the same structure that's there now. The prior use that we had approved in 2023 in case 6473 was approximately 200 feet from Stone Chapel Road. And that was the purpose for the application to the zoning administrator, then Mr. Voigt, for an administrative adjustment. and that was granted by Mr. Voigt. And that decision is in your file as well, that Mr. Dixon mentioned during his introduction. So we're asking for, in this case, in order to combine them both into one presentation, we're asking for the modification of the prior conditional use and a variance from 300 feet, now 200 with the administrative adjustment, down to 124 or so. And that, gentleman and Ms. Mount, is why we're here. The board has already incorporated has already incorporated as evidence the prior case file, 6473. To the extent it's relevant and is not included already, we'd ask the board to include the zoning administrator's administrative adjustment file from case number ZA 2136 as part of the record of these proceedings, for the sake of completeness, so we have all the facts available in the record. So, if I may begin with a quick proffer. As represented to the board in October of 2023, all of the applicant's active processes in the conduct of his use take place in an existing improved space located at 633 Stone Chapel Road in the Carroll County I-2 Heavy Industrial District. These uses are what that district is intended for. It's on a site that has been previously approved and used since the 60s for manufacturing and similar related uses when it was zoned general industrial before the code, the district identifications were changed a few years ago. All activities take place indoors. In the agency comments, there's a couple of things that are significant that I want to call to your attention. The memorandum of the Bureau of Comprehensive Planning. Planning staff finds that the application is consistent with the Carroll County Master Plan. By state code now, we have to include a finding of consistency in conditional use cases. On the strength of that and the record that we'll be developing, I'd ask the specific finding of consistency be included in a favorable decision. Property is located in the Westminster growth area. It's within a priority funding area. It's located adjacent to a FEMA floodplain, a rural legacy area, and a forest conservation boundary, which all sort of restrict some of the area on the site where activities can take place. In our case, we're fortunate because that area is improved with the structure that shields the activities. As indicated in the Bureau of Development Review's response, simplified plan, site plan is in review for this expansion. It's their file SF-25-0003. Also was indicated in the memo from the zoning administrator, based on the information provided and the interpretation of the county code as it applies to this case, the Office of Zoning Administration supports the grant of this request. Close quote. Resource Management and Ag Preservation had no comment. At this point, I'd like to call Mr. Besser as my first witness. You don't have to say, can he sit?
Yeah, you can remain seated.
Thank you.
And please state your name, address, and occupation, and spell for the record your last name.
Vladimir Besser, B-E-S-S-E-R. I'm the owner of American Fleet. I live at 4356 Salem Button Road, Westminster, Maryland, 21157.
Thank you.
Mr. Besser, good morning. the case has been introduced to the board. You are looking for the opportunity to expand your existing footprint into an additional leased area from your landlord. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And what is the purpose that you seek the area to expand?
For storage purposes, single just to store whatever we have access of parts, just to store on our site. It's adjacent, it's convenient for us, and just help us move our processes along faster and be more efficient.
And that's part of what you're already doing on the site in the more confined approved space, correct?
Yes, it's absolutely correct. We processed, since you gave us a grant to do the work, we processed over 500 vehicles for Ukraine and Israel at the moment. And we're finding that we're cramped into a smaller space, so we're just looking to store this somewhere else so we can do work on the equipment.
So your request is not in any way related to a change in what you're doing on the site, is it?
No, we'll be basically doing the same thing. We're just looking to put up racking and storage
And,
inside.
okay. And other than a different place for additional storage, you're not changing the way you're doing the process that you described to the board 2 years ago, are you?
No, they're
All right.
staying the same.
I just want to make clear, the materials that you take off the vehicles as you get them from the factory before you modify the chassis, do you have customers stopping by saying, hey, I'd like to buy a mirror, or, hey, I'd like to buy a door?
No, we do not have any people coming in to our facility buy because we sell them wholesale. So all of the stuff that leaves from us gets loaded into a freight truck through a loading dock and gets shipped out.
All right.
That can be anywhere in the United States.
And let me ask you, is it true there is no new construction or modification of structural improvements that exist now that are part of your request?
No, it's an existing building that was there since, I guess, 60s, like you said. It's the same building. It's vacant at the moment, and we're looking to take it over for our expansion purposes.
All right. So the storage, just to be clear, this may sound like a silly question, but the storage of those materials, is that something that can be perceived by any member of the public on Stone Chapel Road or any neighboring or adjoining properties?
I'm sorry, can you clarify the word perceived?
Well, can anybody hear it, any of the storage operation?
No, I mean, it's again, basically putting up racking and putting up hoods, doors, fenders, stuff like that on a rack and a shelf. And then when we have enough quantity, we have a buyer for it, then we'll pack it into pallets and send it out by freight.
All right.
So there's no noise disturbance extra gonna be than what it's there now.
And if it's enclosed, nobody can see it.
Nobody can see it, yes.
Now, except for the modification of conditions 6 and 7 in the board case from 2003, it's not your intention to modify any of the other conditions in the original board decision, is it?
No?
All right. And you understand why you have to ask for a variance here?
Yes.
Because of the proximity to the road?
Absolutely, yes.
All right. You didn't propose to build the building where it is, did you?
No, it was there
it's-
since 1960s.
Okay. It's existing,
It's existing, there's been no modifications done. We're not in, pretty much, it's a closed box. We're not doing any inside remodeling. So even inside, we're not gonna be doing anything except putting up shelving or racks.
All right. Do you feel it would be an undue hardship or practical difficulty to continue to do your business in this new area if you can't get the variance?
It would make it more difficult, just because of the amount of vehicles we're doing and the space we have. We're really crammed in there, and it's hard for us to move around. So we actually have to make more, move our products around the warehouse that we already have. This takes time, and that, this way, it would make us, give us clear, open space to work on the chassis more.
Given the lack of impact and the fact that you're in an enclosed space, do you think that would be an unreasonable hardship under the circumstances?
It would be harder for us, yes.
Okay. I have no further questions for Mr. Besser. I don't know if anyone else does or the board does.
Okay, I'm assuming no one from the audience has, your children don't have any questions for you at this point.
None that he's going to answer.
Board members, Mr. Caldwell.
A couple of questions. First one is for Mr. Barasox. There was a reference in the file from permit saying a building permit is required for change of use.
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that? Why it would be a change of use?
So typically, if I may, typically, in my experience, when someone is leasing additional space, and it's a new use compared to what was there before, or if you're gonna remodel the interior of the new space to suit that particular tenant, they want a building permit application. Sometimes they get a little more complicated than the applicants think they should, but that's what happens, and I believe, I haven't spoken with Mr. Harris, I believe that's what he's referring to. We're not building anything.
Right. I understand now. It was, I was getting confused. I was considering that American Fleet changing use, not the space that he's proposing to move into is changing use. So
Right.
my apologies for
No, there's no need
misunderstanding
to
that.
apologize. Mr. Harris's memo, if I remember correctly, said it's a building permit needed for change of use of the suite.
Oh, sweet.
And
Okay.
so I took that to mean, without having spoken with him, that the suite is the additional space that he's renting.
Okay. The second question I have is concerning, for Mr. Besser. The addition, you mentioned that you're already working in crowded conditions with the workload that you currently have. So one other factor would be, I would think of interest would be safety would be important to you. Would that be true?
Of course, of course.
Okay, thank you.
Take that very seriously, especially with the equipment that's there. I mean, this is heavy equipment, medium-type trucks, and we take all the precautions. We're actually in the process right now of getting certified with the ARA board, and they come out and inspect it to make sure we have the eye wash stations, the blankets, fire breaks, and all that stuff. We want to be also on board with them because we're part of the ARA, the Recycler Automobile Group, because all these parts for environment, it's good also. We do recycle these parts, and eventually they end up somewhere, not thrown away, end up somebody's car, which is great for our lessen the pollution or making new parts and stuff like that.
Okay, I understand. Back to Mr. Barasox. You had mentioned consistency. There was a particular phrase you used. Could you repeat that for me, please?
Well, it's consistency with a comprehensive plan, and to quote the Bureau of Comprehensive Planning's memo, quote, "Planning staff finds that the application is consistent with the Carroll County Master Plan."
All right. I just wanted to make sure I got that correct. Thank you very much, sir.
You're very welcome.
Ms. Ford Mount?
Just a couple quick
Mr. Snyder.
questions. And this just kind of revalidate what's already been testified to. If I understand, this request does not really modify or change significantly any aspect of the business that was originally approved. Is that correct? Good. And does the use of, so the action, and I'm just looking for a yes or no. So the purpose of this is to make your business more logistically prudent, in that you're not moving things around, but you're having space that allows you to work without having to touch things 3 and 4 times?
Absolutely.
And does this request represent a significant expansion to your business relative to what was previously approved?
What do you mean by significant?
Expansion, meaning, is it an expansion of your business as far as your business has grown and has outgrown its space, and the scope of your business is much greater than it was with the original request?
It's bigger, it would be easier for us to work. I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, the reason I'm asking that question is one of the elements associated with your original approval was the amount of traffic going in and out of the location. And certainly if your business has, for example, doubled, there's twice the number of vehicles coming in and out of the location and so forth. And I'm just trying to get a feeling, are you still in the same range of that you were before, or as your business doubled and tripled, and thereby the traffic in and out of the location has doubled and tripled?
It would not consider any more traffic at all. This would be more just for internal use, and the convenience use of our space and business.
Understood.
And that's pretty much, there's no,
I'm
there's
saying
gonna be
that
no more
the qual-
traffic, because we don't deal with public.
I understand. I'm doing that to understand, because if it's growing and you're shipping more and more parts out, obviously the number of trucks coming in and out, I'm talking about tractor trailers and so forth, would grossly increase. And so I was just trying to get a vibe or an understanding, if you will,
Sure.
of has it really significantly changed? And what I'm hearing from your testimony is it has not.
It has not.
Thank you. That's my questions.
Mr. Rolls?
I have none.
I'd like to call Mr. Hackett, and one of the things he's going to do is identify for the record and evidence a couple of exhibits that are going to go a long way. Pictures are worth 1,000 words to answering some of Mr. Snyder's questions.
And we will, and what will he be an expert witness in today?
Yes. I hope.
Land planning and site design.
Okay, and he has been accepted as an expert witness in those fields before, so we will again extend that courtesy to him.
Thank you.
Mr. Hackett, could you please state your name and address for the record?
Yeah, Martin Hackett, 439 East Main Street.
And you're the president of CLSI?
That's correct.
I'm showing you, before you, a sketch, 8.5 by 14, I believe, and ask if you can identify that.
Yeah, that's the plat to accompany the Board of Zoning Appeals request here today for 633 Stone Chapel Road North.
I'm having Mr. Dixon identify that as Exhibit 1. Did you or your firm prepare that sketch?
Yes, we did.
Thank you, sir.
Can you briefly describe what is shown on that sketch?
Yeah, basically, it's labeling, it's an existing features map of the property, because the property's been in existence for decades. The building's been there since the 60s. So basically, this plat and, of course, the simplified site plan, in this case, is an existing features map, because everything, parking, building, handicap spaces, setbacks and all are the same. There's nothing changing going on.
Okay. Also, a larger sketch that is before you, that I'm having marked as exhibit number 2. Can you identify what that is?
Yes, that's a simplified site plan.
Thank you, sir.
And that's a simplified site plan.
Correct.
What does this show? You said existing conditions?
That's correct. And the shaded areas are the existing business on what he's leasing today, along with Unit K, which is the hatched area, that's the lighter gray, which is the proposed area.
All right. And is this accurate in terms of its size relative to the existing operation?
Yes, it is.
All right. And would you say Unit K is much smaller than the space already used?
Yes.
And it's close, but it's located away from the operational area of the existing lease space?
That's correct.
All right. Is there anything significant about either of these sketches in light of the questions that have been asked today by the board or brought up in testimony by Mr. Besser?
Only it's a unique situation because it's the use and required to getting the variance for the setback. Most times when it's considered, a junkyard, a true junkyard, the setbacks are there to keep these things somewhat from the roadway, to try to keep the scenic byways and some as you're driving down the country roads of Carroll County and any other county. In this case, we're utilizing an existing building that's been there forever. And it's one of those things where this is a use that he needs to expand into to assist him on his, as he talked about in his business, and doesn't have any adverse effect on anybody out there. Nobody's going to see anything different, that kind of thing. It's just, but it's a requirement because they can't possibly have in the zoning book every use known to mankind, and they fall under one, and it's that from that determination they're placed in that, and you have to get the permits based on that. So
Now, I'm calling your attention to sketch 1 in particular, exhibit 1. And by the way, I'd like to move these into evidence.
We will go ahead and accept those two documents into evidence.
That's the 8.5 by 14 sketch. You show the proposed area, proposed junkyard area. That's the newly, or to be rented, the space being rented for expansion. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And is a dimension shown from the edge of the leased area to the public right-of-way for Stone Chapel Road?
Yes,
It's 127 feet on that sketch?
that's correct.
All right, and you believe that's accurate?
Yes,
Okay. The zone, let's confirm, the zone is I-2, is it not?
it is.
And is that the most intense industrial district in the county?
Yes, it is.
All right, you familiar with prior uses on the site?
Yes, I am.
They were, what kind of uses were they?
Some of your bigger uses was the Shelter Systems Truss and Joyce plant, which had very busy and where they had to expand off-site. I mean, they had to literally move.
They had 3 shifts, did they not?
They did. There was a point in time where they were working around the clock. And then it was a pallet plant, with heavy industrial saws and so on. And so, yeah, they're just some to name a couple.
All right. In your opinion, are there any adverse effects associated with this request? Emanating from any of the existing buildings with the expanded use?
No, sir.
Will there be any additional impact to the public or neighboring or adjoining property owners due to the additional interior space?
It will not.
Now, is there anything in particular about this situation that you believe is unique or not typical of these sites?
As I said prior, it's unique because obviously it's an existing building, and we had to determine, the only place we fell into the zoning ordinance was a junkyard. And with that, his operation, and the licenses he needed through the state and all that allows him to do what he's doing, from a zoning standpoint, and this is just an expansion of that area.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, sir.
Okay. I have no further questions from Mr. Hackett.
Go ahead, Mr. Caldwell, questions?
Good morning, Mr. Hackett. How are you, sir?
Fine, yourself?
Fine, thank you. So, just to be clear, this expansion is not visible from the road.
No, sir.
You can't see it, because when you come across the railroad tracks, there's trees right up to the railroad tracks, right? And as soon as you come out of there, you'd have to stop on the road and say, oh, there's an industrial site there, but you still can't see it. It's not visible at all to the public. So there are other buildings that are closer than the requested 127-foot variance.
That's correct.
One would assume that they have permission for those variances.
I believe.
I believe so, okay. So, everything, that's the only questions I have.
This is I understand that depending on the uses that are in those buildings, they may fall within the setback. Because this is considered a junkyard, is the reason for the 300-foot setback.
Got it.
And the variance.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Hackett.
Thank you.
Ms. Fordmount? Mr. Snyder? Ms. Rolls? Boy, quiet bunch here. Okay. Mr. Bowersox, do you have any additional witnesses?
No additional witnesses.
Okay. Presentation of testimony and evidence is now closed and summations are in order. Mr. Bowersox.
Thank you. Briefly, the presentation that we made largely speaks for itself. These exhibits 1 and 2 show what we are and are not trying to do on this site. This is an individual with a unique or nice business idea, and he's done well with it. He wants to be able to continue to do that and contribute to the revenue base here in the county by taking a vacant space in the same building complex that will also enable him to operate more efficiently. He's not proposing to expand his use physically. He's not proposing to grow into a Fortune 500 company. He wants to be able to do what he does as efficiently as he can. There will be absolutely no greater impact from a grant of the modification than what's going on now. I am unaware of any complaints that have been lodged with the zoning administrator's office over the last 2 years about some rogue or renegade operation being conducted by Mr. Besser and American Fleet. He's proven himself to be a good corporate citizen. He's moved to Carroll County, his residence, and he wants to continue to operate this business here. He's got a good location, good relationship with his landlord. This is one of those situations that we kind of hope we see more often at times. It would be an unreasonable hardship if he cannot expand and make no impact at the same facility where he's located, right down the hall from where the rest of his facility is conducted. That's unreasonable, and it's a hardship. This property is, if not unique in the traditional zoning variance sense, but when one looks at, if you look at Exhibit 2, you'll see features on other parts of this property, like a pond, easement areas, and everything else. This is the only location on the property where uses can take place, where many uses can take place, is in the existing buildings. They were built for this kind of application in the I-2 heavy industrial district. It is consistent with the plan otherwise. When you take all of those factors and you combine the fact that the county doesn't have a provision in the zoning code that is better than a round hole for this square peg of a use, and he's therefore lumped in a category of junkyards, even though what he's doing was probably never on anybody's radar screen when that zoning definition was adopted. The cumulative effect of all of these circumstances make this a truly unique situation. And because of that, we'd like the board to approve the expansion of the use, the modification of conditions 6 and 7, or acknowledgement that he's complied with conditions 6 and 7 of the prior use, in Mr. Besser's favor. That's all we have.
Okay, thank you. The hearing and record of this case is now closed in accordance with the Open Meetings Act of Maryland. The board will now consider the case. Mr. Caldwell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's clear that Mr. Besser is, goes by the book, follows the codes, does everything he can to comply with the requirements. It is a unique circumstance operating this business. It is an opportunity to expand for safety purposes, for manufacture of the modified chassis, the preparation of the chassis for uses by the end users. It's a sound use of the space. It does not impact the adjacent properties. It can't be seen from the road. I see no reason not to approve this modification of the application.
Ms. Ford-Mount?
I appreciate you coming back before us to clear that. I appreciate that it's not a junkyard, even though it's in an industrial zone. To me, it's a safety issue as well. I think adding on so that you can expand your operation inside that no one can see, it's not going to affect the general public at all. It will just benefit you. I see no reason not to approve it.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. I strongly advocate for the vote in favor of the request. I think it's a reasonable person sitting here would think it's a very prudent move. I think it's good for everyone, including the county employees and so forth. Specifically about the variance, I think the case has been put forth. It would put forth an unreasonable hardship to expect compliance with the variance. So I would support granting the variance in that the structure is already existing. I like the analysis of the example of the square peg round hole. You just can't cover everything. And sometimes it sounds kind of absurd that we would look at this operation and call it a junkyard, but it is what it is, and that's why the board's here to try to bring some sanity to that situation. So in that case, I'd advocate for the approval of the request as well as the variance.
Mr. Olds?
I would concur and advocate for approval.
what we have here is, it is an anomaly, and when we first heard this case 2 years ago, I was shocked at what the use was as compared to what the application was. And this obviously is a use that isn't accurately defined in our zoning code, and this was the closest thing to it, was a junkyard. In the audience 2 years ago, we had a adjoining property owner, Mrs. Hecht, was very concerned about the devaluation of her property that might occur because she was adjacent to a junkyard. And after hearing the testimony 2 years ago, she had no qualms about the use that was being requested. The other thing that Mr. Bowersox didn't disclose, that he also happens to be a neighbor and he's representing this client. So if there were any issues with noise, dust, fumes, traffic, or et cetera, I don't think he'd be sitting here representing this client today.
The neighborhood association would have other plans for me.
Yeah, so anyway, it's, I'm glad to see there's adjacent structure that can be used by the applicant today, and that it will make his life a little bit easier logistically in doing the work that he does. I don't see any issues with the use. It's not a more intense use, it's the same use, just at the convenience of the occupant, and I'm assuming the blessing of the owner, since he's entering into a lease agreement with you. So with that, do we have a motion?
I can provide one for you.
Okay.
In case number 6564, before the Board of Zoning Appeals, that the board approve the application for the modification of the conditional use as originally approved in case number 6473, and being consistent with the county comprehensive plan, approves the use of the junkyard and distance variance of 120 feet from the public highway.
Okay, do we have a second?
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none,
One thing I want to make clear was, the applicant had requested 120 feet, so I erred on that side, just to be safe. Okay.
Understood.
okay, any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Okay, our oral decision will become final when a written decision, upon a written decision, which will be issued within 30 days unless otherwise extended by the board. And the board's decision may be appealed by filing a petition for judicial review with the clerk of the Circuit Court of Carroll County in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 200, Title 7 of the Maryland Rules of Procedure. The appeal must be filed within 30 days of the date of the board's written decision. Thank you very much, and this hearing is adjourned.